The Isle of Lewis is largely a peat moor, similar to the Somerset levels but on a much bigger scale and interspersed with lochs. The peat was laid down since the time of the building of the megaliths due to a change in climate to a much cooler one, so many of the sites have been partially or completely covered in it. The impressive stone circle and rows at Callanish are on a hill next to a large rock outcrop. Resembling a Celtic cross, it has a central stone to its circle and a chambered tomb between it and the circle to the east. It has rows seemingly marking the cardinal points, single rows to the south, west and east, and slightly offset double avenue to the north. The site is set in a well-preserved prehistoric landscape, and the various sites in it have been given identification numbers, as well as having their own Gaelic names.
So there were like these hard rocks, lumps of rock, and when they were covered, the ice age was here, it was covered by ice. As it moved, it caught on the rocks that were like the head of the crag, and then as it passed over, it dropped all this rubble. I don't know if it says it on all the information boards, but apparently before they started cultivating here, there was a small circle, which was like a bank and ditch, I think, and then they cultivated the land, and then there were a series of wooden structures, maybe wooden huts, before they put any stones up. Then they put up the tall stone and the circle, and then later was the avenue and the Michael arms. And I mean, some people think that the south sort of line of stones went on further and might have been an avenue as well. And then there was another wooden structure inside. It's like where the cairn is now, and then much later the cairn was put there. So I mean, I'm just really interested in what these wooden structures were, and whether, because I get sort of feeling sometimes like it was a sort of carried out explanation there, and or it was a sort of mortuary house. It's interesting that down in the US, they excavated a village, a very old village. I can't remember whether it's sort of Bronze Age or Neolithic, and they found circular houses. Different parts of the house were used at different times of the day for different purposes, and there was a sort of sacred area, and under there they found burials of bodies that had been mummified, and there's a sort of form of mummification. It could have been like when the people first died, they were put in the peat, and then but these bodies were hundreds of years older than when the houses were built. So it's this sort of tradition. I think you get it in South America, them carrying like mummified bodies, the ancestors. So it's just whether, that's just my own feeling, whether these places, these wooden places, were places that where the ancestors were kept. And then you've got the cairn, and there were some cremated remains found in there when they excavated it. And to me, it's just always, it faces the east, the entrance is to the east. And, this is a wonderful place to come at night, in the dark, in the winter. It's also wonderful at sunrise and sunset. It does seem to be like a place of the night and the dark, and sort of death and rebirth, and that's why I feel that, maybe the bodies were in there, and then when certain astrological or astronomical things happened, it was like this gateway opened, this pathway to the realms of the ancestors or the homelands in the sky, and so the spirits of... No, I mean, I'm interested in the legend. There's lots of quite well-known legends about this place, but there's a I suppose a creation, it's not quite a creation legend, but the sort of famous one is that the stones were brought here by a great priest or king who brought the stones in boats, and he brought with him sort of lesser priests and some black men. I'm interested just from that point of view. Who are these? Recently there's been all this DNA business about, Cheddar Man was discovered to be black, they were white and they were sort of the indigenous people.
The black men of Lewis.
Yeah. Anyway, it was them. Some of them died and were buried in the stone, apparently. And this priest, all the priests wore cloaks of bird skin and feathers, and the lesser ones had brightly coloured cloaks, and the main one, he was all in white, and he had a girdle of, I can't remember, mallard drake's feathers, and he always had wrens flying around his head, so that sounds very shamanic to me, you know. And then when they put the stones up, sort of some of them went and some of them stayed with him, and he obviously sort of converted lots of other people from other islands who came and followed him. You know. But there's so many ways you can think of that story. That there's another legend, kind of about Beltane. Really, it's about the cuckoo. That all the cuckoos actually go over in the winter. They go to Tiernan Oak, and so at the beginning of May they fly here, and all of them come to Callanish, and they fly around, and then they go off to wherever they're going to go. And the reason why they don't build nests is because if they nested, they'd become grounded and sort of fixed to the earth, and they wouldn't be able to go back to Tiernan Oak. And it's very auspicious if you hear your first cuckoo on May Day morn in the Callanish Stones. And the first year I was ever here, that happened.
Oh, wow.
One of the stones seems to have an image resembling a lion on it.
The nails and the mouth and the chin.
Oh, yeah.
I can see a Celtic.
Well, as I say,
Old Grandmother Turtle on the outcrop to the south of Callanish.
now that's what I call her, but she's. Can you see her there?
Yes.
With her wonderful face and smile and when I first came here, I used to go. I hadn't sort of seen her, noticed her. I used to go and sit in the little cave and look up there, because obviously she was there long before the stones or anything. And then I think when I was sort of late or early 90s, sometimes like that, they excavated here, and they found like two very deep holes. And well, there's a thought, somebody has a thought that there was a stone, and it might even have been the centre stone that was there before it was there. And there was like an arc of post holes and like fire pits. So it was obviously quite a focal point. So she was always important. And then that's actual. If we just go up there, that's Knock-on Turtha up there. And there was some excavations up there, and they found two cairns, made of two cairns. They didn't have any burials in them, but that was obviously, a very important point, and it might have been, one of the reasons why the stones are here. She's lovely. I love her.
Yeah.
So I wrote a creation myth about her. One year I thought I ought to write about her, and I just sat down one night, and this whole creation myth just came out.
This chambered cairn is on a ley running along the northern avenue, coming from a mean following stretch of road, going through the circle, along the avenue, through the Turtle, and the adjacent coincident road beyond it, through two peaks with cairns and a chambered cairn east of Loch Dalberg.
There were plans to widen the road here, and this burial chamber was discovered, and a lot of people tried as hard as they possibly could to get the plans changed, because the road was going to cut right through it. No matter how the sort of experts came and said why it should be saved, and they wanted, you know, so can you change the route of the road? Can you build a, you know, a bridge over it? But they didn't. And on the winter solstice, they came and cut 2/3 of it away. And so this is what has been left, and you know they've restored it a bit. But and this is in direct alignment with the avenue. So, you know, great flow of energy up there.
The east-running equinox sunrise line through Callanish runs through the centre of the circle and the burial chamber, as well as the western and eastern rows. There seems to be a hill notch visible to the west. The ley dowsed at 17 paces wide, with the stone rows roughly central to it, from the south 10 paces to the row and 7 beyond. The next site on this line is Callanish 14, apparently visible from the main site, although I couldn't pick it out. It's a single small upright stone on the summit of a ridge, and sunrise occurs over it at the equinox, viewed from Callanish. The line then continues to the summit of Bain Raibach, and on to the chambered cairn on Gallows Hill at Stornoway, overlooking the harbour and town. The remains of the chamber can be seen, and a modern cairn has been built adjacent to it. There is also a clump of trees, including conifers. Trees are a rarity on Lewis, and another to the west of the line, and beyond it there is what appears to be a small hump of some kind on a hilltop, though it's difficult to see from the map what this is. The place seems energetic and peaceful despite its name and presumed former use. The line then follows some mean-following roads near the airport and crosses to the Eye Peninsula to run along a short stretch of coincident road on which is a mysterious unmarked centre with nothing whatsoever significant present at this time, although the rod spun there, indicating a centre. It's at a low point on the road. Professor Tom classified the central circle at Callanish as a Type A flattened circle. The striking reclining hill figure known as the Sleeping Beauty is visible from Callanish, but here she is at closer quarters. Callanish 2.
About this one, I think this one is really special. I've slept in this once and had a dream that I'll tell you about. And there wasn't any cairn in the middle of this one, so it was just as it is. I mean, whether they were put up by a different lot of people from all the others, or whether it was a progression of circles, you know, we don't know. But I loved it. This one always feels very female to me. Yeah.
The elliptical shape of Callanish 2, with its geometry. Callanish 3 is also a Type A flattened circle. Another interesting ley in the Callanish area is one described by R. Carpenter following the 2006 moot on Lewis. Two stones in the stone circle of Callanish 4 align with another on the horizon. The stone on the horizon is directly in line. It's probably a sighting stone. This line is 340 degrees relative to grid north, about 336 to 337 degrees true north, furthest north moonset and furthest south moonrise position at major standstill. He writes, "The pendulum recorded a strong energy line between the sighting stone and the circle, but also a powerful one towards the north, and a small hill with something on top, unnamed on my old map, but on the new map says Knock Cairn. This line can be extended through Callanish 2 stone circle, Callanish 12 standing stone at Stonefield, to a peak at 191414 just beyond the Broch at Doon Carloway. In addition to the points mentioned, the line goes through Callanish 9 to the south and runs along a coincident stretch of road by Callanish village and the Callanish Free Church of Scotland church on this road, presumably subconsciously sighted. The ley dowsed at 12 paces at Callanish 2 Callanish 4, the church, and Callanish 12 standing stone. The latter is now set in cobbles at the entrance to the Stonefield housing estate, but is in its original position. It was discovered during peat cutting in 1923. Callanish 4 is an ellipse, but also has tom geometry. A beehive hut or shieling, used by shepherds, usually the women and children. A spectacular quartz cliff, which could have been quarried for making tools. Harris, to the south of the island, is much more hilly, and there is a coffin path from one side of the island to a graveyard on the other. The end of this is straight, although most of it, as it exists today, is not. However, when Jill was walking this in the past, she's looked back and seen what seemed to be the remnants of a green road, which was straight, but is now just clumps of heather with channels of water running on each side. This very different reclining hill figure, known as the Hag, is visible from the coffin path.
I just find this whole bit really, really powerful.
Up there on that hill, there's a dune. There was a dune up there. We can't go to that now.
A dune?
A dune.
Like a fort?
What's a dune? Well, yeah, a dune is a sort of circular building. It's smaller than a broth.
How do you spell dune?
D-U-N.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. And there are lots of them on islands as well. We might go to one of those. But anyway, so this. Yeah, so we go in here and we'll see that it's amazing inside, and there's the carving on the outside.
An unusual Sheila Nagig holding a child. Macleod clan chiefs of Dunwagan and Harris built this church as their burial place in about 1520. Alastair Macleod's tomb is one of the finest tombs in Scotland. These stones with sword carvings date from the 1400s and 1500s. They once marked the burial places of members of the clan Macleod. They illustrate the high status of the family and their prominence on the island. The Ashmore stone circle had been completely covered by peat and was only discovered in the 1980s. This is unusual in that it's truly circular and so doesn't have tom geometries, but it aligns through Callanish, Callanish 2 and Callanish 7 to the west. Callanish 8, by the bridge to the island of Great Bernera, is also known as Clytier, which means cliffs. There is a single standing stone on the other side of the bridge. There is a strange structure like a seat on this site. In 1993, a great winter storm reconfigured the beach at Bostow, revealing substantial stonework within the sand dunes, where gradually eroding middens had long been observed. Eventually this threatened site was excavated in 1996, and a series of well-preserved houses, some virtually intact, were brought to light. 4 houses were represented, although the village had probably once extended right across the present beach. The main settlement was occupied around the 6th to the 9th centuries AD, a period described variously as the Late Iron Age or Pictish period. and comprised a cluster of semi-sunken circular or cellular buildings, each with a rectangular central hearth and at least one smaller chamber opposite the main entrance.
Certainly in the Neolithic, but even in the Iron Age, the sea was much further out, and the loch coming in would have been more like a river, and this was very fertile Maca land, so it's been inhabited as in quite an important habitation for a very long time. And when we go through, they found some years ago an Iron Age village. It would actually have been far more expensive, and they excavated it, and the houses were built underground with just a roof over the top, and they sort of dug it out where the wall was going to be, and then sort of built a wall, and then they sort of impacted a lot of sand, and then they built another wall with sand in the middle. So that's how they were, and they were a funny sort of jelly shape. And they've covered them up now, and there's more and more. I mean, every winter the sea comes in and just smashes everything to bits, and so there's more and more and more of it all disappearing. And there's just a few stones laid on the top to show you where the walls were, but there's even since they excavated, there's about half of it's gone that was there, but it would have been far more extensive. So somebody then working on the plans has sort of reconstructed one of these Iron Age buildings, and that's what you're going to go in. And now I want to tell you about my dream, and it's one of the reasons why it's most special to me. Is that when I first came up here in 1982, I slept in Circle 2 at Callanish, and I had this dream where I thought at the time it was like in the Mediterranean, and I was sort of up high looking down, and there was like hills going up that way, and there was like a circle of islands out in the sea, and it was very sort of blue and turquoise, and down in the middle was a labyrinth, and out of the labyrinth were walking 13 women with pots on their heads which were shaped like the Callanish stones, the main circle. And then a bit later on in that same trip, I came here with a group of friends, and they'd been told to come here, and they went down looking at the rocks on the shore, and I walked up the glen, and I turned round and I thought, oh my God, this is the place in the dream. And where there was the labyrinth, there's now the cemetery. But then I met up with my friends, and they've been looking at the rocks, and they said this is where the stones came from. So although like different archaeologists have got different theories as to where the stones from all the different circles of Callanish came from, I've still got this wondering whether they did actually come from here, and they took them up the river on the boats, and there is that legend about them the stones coming on a boat. So it's just one of those things. It's like there's no archaeological proof of it, but it's just, that's what anyway. So.
It's an Iron Age house replica. My name is Colin, and I'm one of the volunteers with the Historical Society here in Bernera. The Iron Age house that you're in here is a replica of one of the houses that was found at the Iron Age village, which is just along a little bit. You might have seen that on your way in. You can't see very much up there now, because after the dig in 96, 97, they had to cover it all over again to protect it. So there's just a sort of a few outlines of shapes, to be honest. It's quite difficult to know what it is. But this house was constructed by the Bernera Historical Society and the community because they felt that it's such an important site that they wanted to do something to show the history of the island, as well as give the visitors a bit more information. So it was built round about the year 2000. I've only been here 3 years, so I wasn't involved in the building of it. The format or the floor plan of this house is based on one of the houses that they actually dug up at the village, and it's known as a jelly baby house. Strange name, but you've got this round fat body, which from the outside you don't realise just how big it is inside. And then through here, which you can go into shortly, is a much smaller rounded area. The walls are being constructed as near as possible to the dig that they found. So the door, for instance, and the width of the walls, they basically used the same size of stones that they found in the dig. The walls are all over a metre thick. And inside here, you can see it's sort of not dressed, but a properly laid out stone. And there's the same about a metre out. And then the inside is packed full of sand and smaller stones. And the ground level is actually at the height of the wall. The idea we think of that was because we are quite exposed here on the Western Islands, as you might have realised. So wind is a major factor, and so having it down at below ground level, it's much more sheltered. At the moment there's a southerly wind coming in, and you're in here and you can hardly feel it. A little bit draft because the door's open, but that's about it. We know that there was a hearth in the original house, and we do use peats, which we think that's exactly what they'd have been burning in here as well. When the fire's going, which we do during the summer when it's sort of open a lot longer, the light in here is really good. You can see virtually everything you want, no problems at all. We also do experimental archaeology here. The lady who's the main guide, she's been living in this place in the summer for 4 hours a day for 17 years, 18 years. And she's actually made these pots that you can see there, all from local clay that she's found within the area. I don't think she actually fired any of it, other than having it sitting beside the fire. She did it by just moulding it and leaving it to dry. And she has actually cooked things in these pots on the fire. So she thinks that those are probably very likely the type of thing that they would use. The roof is the biggest question mark that we've got. We don't know what they actually made the roofing of. It was very probable it was wood. There'd be more wood around on the islands back in those days. The Iron Age village was dated to around about 700 AD, so it's the end of the Iron Age up here. So what we think is it would be something like this. The width of the walls give the impression that there was something laying on top of it, so it's strong enough to hold a roof structure. We have no idea whether they did have an upper floor or not, but with the angle of the walls, it seems likely that it would be this sort of shape, so there would be room above, and they would use that room. We think they would be very good at using every bit of space that they had. This would probably be, if it was there, a sleeping platform for children, that sort of thing. Because inside each of these houses there would be an extended family. Now we don't know how many people, we haven't found any bones or any cemeteries, but we know in the Iron Age that they would have families, all the generations would live together in one place. So we feel that that was it. You will probably have seen the roof as you came in is turfed at the moment, and if any of you looked up as you came in the door, you'll see it's pretty bare. This is the second material that we've used in the house. Originally we used thatch on it because there was a lot of reeds and things can be found locally in grass. It didn't really last and the wind kept blowing it away. So about 4 years ago it was put turf on it. Unfortunately the turf that they put on at the time was only one thin layer, and it hasn't stood up to the test of time, or the rabbits. To be honest, the rabbits are the biggest problem. So within the next month or so, it's our intention to re-turf the whole of the roof. And what we'll do is we'll cut turfs from around the area and just transport them here, and it'll take us a few working days to do the whole thing. But by then we think it'll be all, hopefully, ready to last a few more years. There's a smoke hole at the top. Again, we didn't know if there would be such a thing, but from other Iron Age properties that you've probably seen and been to, there's usually a smoke hole in the roof, and it'll be above the fire. It gives a lot of light, and it's amazing how much light there is in here, and with the door open as well, with a fair bit of light. The place through here is quite controversial. The academics feel that it was probably somewhere for maybe doing weaving or doing work during the winter. However, Elizabeth has tried to do work in there, and it's just too dark. Even in the midsummer, when you've got as much light as you can coming in here, there's not very much light in there. It's also about a foot lower on the floor level than this level, and what we've found is that the temperature in there is always a few degrees lower than it is in here, and it's fairly constant as well. So what the feeling is locally now is that it's probably a ladder. They would store food in there. You'll see when you go in that there's some niches in the back, like shelves or little cupboards, and they would be able to, I mean, if there was smoke, they had food up here, they could smoke it as well. So we feel that that would be it, because obviously in the winter there wouldn't be an awful lot of food available to them, so they'd have to store everything from the summer. There's obviously a lot of fish, because we found an awful lot of scallop shells and things around here, and we know that they would probably use them as little bowls and scoops and things like that. The wall between here and the other room, we don't know what it would be made of. We know that the stonework went up to the same level all the way around, but it would be likely that if it was somewhere for storing food, there would be some sort of barrier between here and there, just to partly keep heat into this place and keep that one a little bit cooler. Any questions? Well, I think
we were here a few years ago, and one of our group was a master dowser, and he noted that all the hearths were aligned to the north or something, and the same with the stones across the doorways.
Right.
There was an alignment. It didn't mean that the house would rigidly follow that alignment.
Yeah.
But the hearth and the porches did.
Right.
So they might have been slightly off to one side. But
Yeah.
that's about all I can remember, Lawrence. Can you remember any more? Pat Toms.
What artefacts have been found?
There's a lot of bone materials, bone combs and strange looking things that are about the size of this torch and a bit rounded with holes through them, which nobody really knows what they are. They might have been fishing weights, they might have been loom weights, it could have been kids' toys, we don't know. Those are the sort of main things that we've got. We've got them in the museum here, or some of them.
Okay.
The bulk of the artefacts that found and all the pottery and things like that went to Edinburgh.
Right.
But because, again, because it was such an important find for the islanders, we actually built a new museum here, which is down at the community centre, to meet national standards, so we could keep some of the artefacts here, which is quite a big thing, because a lot of these things just disappear to Edinburgh. Nobody ever sees them again.
Well, if you come here to see it, you want to see all the artefacts as well, don't you?
Yeah, I mean that's mainly why we did it. I mean we've only got a small display case down museum. We couldn't leave them here because obviously it's not secure.
Yeah.
And to keep that sort of thing, you've got to be accredited, and humidity and light and everything else must be controlled. In here there's no such control of any of that really. I think that one of the things is that the village, which is literally just along here, the sea at the time, 700 years ago, would be about another kilometre further out. And what we feel that, as well as putting the houses down below the surface of the land for comfort and shelter, it also made some less profile if there's any invaders or people going past in ships. So obviously water was the main transport at that time. And if we did feel that when we turfed it, that if you turf it, it makes it just look like a little bit of a hill. Whereas if there's thatch on it, it would maybe stand out a little bit more, so for security reasons as well.
Oh, can we go and have a look
Yeah,
at the
we
other
can do. We keep peat in there as a store.
something to stack it against.
Yeah.
maybe,
So they were just lying flat?
No, they were up right
Oh,
like
they're
that.
like
That's
that.
why they were put up like
Oh,
that.
okay.
See, everything in here is a replica of the house that they actually
Right,
took
okay.
it from. So nothing was put in here that wasn't found.
So that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. So the fire's there. I think it's something to do with the fire.
By hand.
It probably
I think, I'm just thinking out loud here, but I'm thinking that it has some relationship maybe to keep things warm, maybe.
so we keep the peat in there. 'Cause
Yeah.
the peat would have to be kept dry
Yeah,
to
yeah,
burn.
yeah,
I mean,
quite.
okay, they'd stack
So,
it, but
yeah.
even nowadays people who cut the peat and leave it outside to dry still have to take it inside for it to dry finally before they can burn it.
Built at the turn of the century.
Is there any more questions I'll try and answer?
1920s or in 1930s.
Did they have flax? Did they
Um,
make linen?
I
Did they
haven't
go
seen.
flax?
I haven't seen anything saying that there's flax up this far north. Yeah. They might have traded it because at that time there's a lot of trade going up and down
Yeah.
the
It's not
coast.
that far north for flax, is it? I mean, flax in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of things. Though they've just because we're that little bit more wild on the west
Just a
coast
bit.
out here. Things don't grow.
It's
Things that
different.
grow in Ullapool won't grow here.
Yeah.
Did they have candles? Did they know how to make candles, do you reckon?
We think that they probably knew how to burn down oil, animal fat and things like that. I mean, we're talking 700 AD, it's not BC here. So there was, it's after the Roman period, and so there would be a lot of things here that you might not have got in the early Iron Age, when other places that are much older.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, Skara Brae is known as a Neolithic place, it's not a... So it's thousands of years old, unlike here, which is much...
It actually seems to be more advanced in its technical skills in some ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I now know that they're talking about the Neolithic, particularly up in Orkney. I don't know if you've been up there yet.
Not this time, but I have been before.
Yeah, they found that whole new temple complex by the Ring of Brodgar, and that's changing the whole perception
Oh, I
of
haven't
how...
seen that. When did they find that?
I think they first discovered it about 10 years ago, but they've actually been building on it, or digging it every summer since.
Okay.
And there's now a whole temple complex that they think they've found up there,
Wow.
right next to the Ring of Brodgar. And the last I saw about it was that they were actually thinking that the influence of the Neolithic people in the UK was more based in north of Scotland than down at Stonehenge.
Oh, okay.
They think that the north of Scotland was actually older than Stonehenge, what they were doing there. And there's a massive lot of communication up and down the west coast. Who knows for reality. I was actually out in Malta last week looking at the Neolithic temples there, and I hadn't realised that they were 1,000 years older than the pyramids. And some of the stones that they're showing, well, one would be the length of this room in the height.
I know.
Yes.
Massive.
That's name for Tortune or something.
Yeah.
And they're like some of the markings are exactly like Newgrange, almost identical to Newgrange in Ireland. So
That's
there's
right,
something's
yeah.
been going on that happened to Malta sailors or something.
Yeah.
that go
There's
to
many
Ireland.
who think they could actually levitate
Yes.
them, the stones.
Yeah.
Or there's other theories that there were giants at that time.
Yeah.
And there's been giant skeletons that have been discovered.
That's it.
Yeah.
And my feeling is that the Phoenicians who were travelling around were building things.
Yeah, I think the Phoenicians certainly had an impact on them. But the Neolithic in Malta, for instance, was pre-Phoenician. The original people who were doing the monumental structures in Malta, they disappeared, and then the island was empty apparently, according to the records.
Yeah.
And then the Phoenicians came in after them.
You know, I have a friend who's a theory that the Phoenicians, the original Druids, or the culture that became the Druids, left and went to the Middle East, formed the Phoenician culture and came back years later.
Oh, right.
First time you hear it, you think, no way, but there's more evidence is coming up that may be the case. You said they left and they came back.
That's right. There's definitely, I think, a lot more communication and movement of people in those times than ever before have been found. And they're finding things all the time, and it's just changing our views of history. It's great.
Yeah. And the people in Nazareth are supposed to be of Celtic stock, so...
Are they?
Yeah.
I haven't heard that one.
Yeah.
Some even believe that Jesus was of Celtic stock.
Yeah. Got 3 bloodlines in the Bible 4 by Tony Busby. it gives the bloodlines of the family.
Yeah.
And one of them is of the Celtic.
All right. Interesting. I'll have to look into
So
that.
you'll have to get that.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that.
The Trushell Stone is the tallest stone in Scotland. We all felt it was powerful. Then Les Wilmore found a mysterious orb had appeared on a series of pictures, apparently moving over it. This stone is on a ley previously found in 2010, going from to Tom and Rissail Summit, then to Stornoway, running along Kenneth Street to the ornate Martin's Church. It dowsed as 17 paces wide. Bridget's Well was associated with Bride or Bridget, who was a goddess associated with smithing, and there was a shape of a horseshoe on the well. Her traditions were transferred to the Christian Saint Bridget. The well had a very peaceful atmosphere. Steinaclite is the remains of a prehistoric oval enclosure, prominently sited on the crest of a hill. The nearby loch contains an island dune, which is probably 2,000 years old. Living there offered protection and was perhaps for those of high status. A powerful ley was detected passing through the site.
I mean, this was restored in, I don't know, 1812, I think, or something like that. And it was renowned for being a healing place, and it healed or cured insanity. And they used to. They brought people here, and they walked them. Took them 7 times round Diesel, round the church, and then they sprinkled them with water from, I think it was St. Ronan's well, and then they put them on the altar and they tied them down and they left them there for the night. And cured them of insanity. But it's been sort of restored by the Episcopal Church now, so but people it's still like got this healing thing. They used to make little, like they do in other countries, and a little, like wooden, if you got a bad leg, you made a little wooden leg and you left it there, you know. They still, I think there's a whole wall in there with like prayers and things like that.
The shape of the island resembles a woman's face in profile, and the third eye position on the forehead is Tai Nan Kaliachan Dub, the house of the black-veiled women, assumed to have been a nunnery.
It's the Tai Nan Kaliachan Dub, which is like the house of the old black women, or black-veiled women, because Kyle also means veil, like nuns. So it was reputedly a nunnery. I've always got the feeling that there was, you know, a lot of sort of a women's community, shall we say, here before the nuns. But, the black-veiled women, you know, lived. This up here was Gallon Head, and it was a MOD radar tracking station in the Cold War. And there was a huge MOD fence, and it was fenced off for 60 years. And about 2 years ago, we as a community went through the community right to buy process and bought the land back from the MOD and opened it up to the public. And really because we believe that it's actually a fantastic bit of land. There's no sort of ancient sites up there, although there is a World War I lookout post building. But we just find it to be a really powerful spot, and we wanted to own it as a community. And what was I going to say? I can't think what I was going to say now. We've got all sorts of plans for turning that big building into like an observatory and a proper visitor centre. But we'll see what happens. And we are going to try and construct a sort of all abilities pathway right up to the top. And it sort of keeps on going. You think you've got to the top, and then there's a bit more, and there's a bit more.
Doon Carlaway is a broch tower, a type unique to Scotland. Dating from around 200 BC, it had a double wall, and it was noted that the style of building was similar to much older structures, such as New Grange in Ireland, with groups of larger and smaller stones. I used a ley on Lewis to measure the time of the solar transition effect at this more northerly place. I discovered in Derbyshire in 1991 that leys, although they individually differ in width, seem to double their width at sunrise and sunset for a short time. In Derbyshire, I found this to be about 25 minutes. Then when I tested it in Edinburgh some time later, it was found to be 35 minutes. On Lewis it seemed to be 39 minutes. The ley had grown from 20 to 40 paces. There seemed to be a tendency for leys found on Lewis to be wider than the others found elsewhere. In the south of England there seemed to be a sliding scale, with the narrowest leys being more frequently. There are many more 6-pace leys than wider ones there. On Lewis, no 6-pace ones were encountered at all. But despite the rich prehistoric landscape and the wide areas of uninhabited moor, the centres which were revealed showed that the phenomenon of subconscious sighting is just as active here as anywhere else.